My dearest Richard, it's been months since I last heard from you, and grow increasingly concerned for want of a letter. I miss you so, and pray that you are safe. The newsreel showed footage from the liberation of Paris. I looked for you and Mikey, but didn't see either of you. Tell him that Shirley is fine and that the baby is getting bigger.
Pop says I'm still too young to enlist, but I can't wait to join the fight. I may do what Billy Johnson did and lie about my age so I can join up. Maybe we could be in the same outfit. Wouldn't that be swell? I'll bet the girls are pretty there. Have you seen any action?
A crew arrived in England on 12 December. The place is beautiful and the people are really neat. The chow is different from ours, but it tastes pretty good. The beer, though.
The Yankees did it again and clobbered the Cleveland Indians 10-3. Johnny Lindell hit 4 consecutive doubles. Can you believe that? I made 20 clams on that game and put a few in the Maxwell half so we can crack a few when you...
I do so want this horrible war to be over. The Army chaplain visited 4 more families this week, and it's only Wednesday. Last week, our neighbor Shirley learned that her father and her brother were both...
Baby doll, I'm writing this by the light of the moon in a forest called the Ardennes. It's really cold here, but we keep a few embers going at all times to stay warm. I'm really thankful for all the hunting trips with my old man, and for him teaching me how to stay alive in the elements. Our unit will soon be pushing into Germany, as the Krauts are falling back. With any luck, I'll be home.
And Georgina put up new curtains in her kitchen that she made from old flannel shirts. Father thinks they're ugly, but Mother says that they're precious and she's thinking of making them herself. Lady had 8 puppies last week, and little Lucy is having such a ball.
I don't know how I'm going to reconcile what I've seen during my last 2.5 years here, Dad. Last week, our unit liberated a concentration camp called Dachau. You can't imagine the horrors these people have suffered. How can man do such things to one another? I can only imagine what you went through in the big one, Dad. Tell Mom I love her, and tell Father Randall that I'll take him up on his offer when I...
In 1944, the U.S. military had a serious problem. Millions of pieces of unsorted mail had been sitting in cold, dark warehouses in England and in France. Letters and packages meant for U.S. soldiers fighting across Europe. Birthday cards, photographs, love letters, and Christmas gifts were crucial to morale, and morale was key in winning the war. With every passing day, the piles of mail grew bigger and bigger, and morale got lower and lower. Military leaders at home and in Europe knew they needed to find a way to get through all that mail and get it to the soldiers who desperately needed that connection to home. But how do you move thousands of pounds of mail during a world war? You put a team of women in charge to get the job done.
You've planted your dreams. It's time to release. No more fear. No more fear. Surrender in her. Trust you won't fall. Time to fly. Time to fly.
Hello, and welcome back to the Aquitaine Project, a podcast where we learned from yesterday how we can shine today and create a brighter tomorrow. I'm Marlo Mead, your host, guide, and fellow traveler, on a journey where together we draw upon the life lessons and wisdom of women past and present, women I affectionately call my Brightlighters. Each episode, I'll introduce to you a woman whose story has the power to inspire each of us to become Brightlighters in our own right. For me, these women transcend time, teaching us lessons we can use in our own lives each and every day. Shining their light from different centuries, cultures, and corners of the earth, they light the way, making it possible for us to create our own light and shine it forward. I invite you to join me as we step into the light of some pretty remarkable women and learn a little, grow a little, laugh a little, and shine a lot.
Free your soul.
Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. These words, originally written by Greek historian Herodotus during the Greek and Persian War in 500 BC about the royal mounted couriers in ancient Persia, are today the unofficial motto of the U.S. Postal Service and convey the timeless need for human communication and connection over long distances. Before the instantaneous gratification offered by email, the internet, and iPhones, family and friends, sometimes living hundreds or even thousands of miles apart, sent letters back and forth through the mail, sharing everything from daily happenings to life-changing events. For decades, the mail was in many ways the connective tissue that held American families together. And in 1941, when the United States entered World War II and sent her sons across the seas to fight in foreign lands, it was the mail, letters and packages from home, that again kept American families connected, providing joy, hope, and comfort to soldiers stationed across Europe. As the war progressed, it became increasingly difficult for the military to maintain basic services. Priority was given to food, equipment, and supplies. The mail was literally set aside. Now, I want you to keep in mind, many of the soldiers serving overseas were still teenagers. Most had never been out of their hometown, let alone out of the country, and they were thrust into a war for which none of them could have ever imagined or been prepared for. Much of the time they were tired, cold, hungry, dirty, and lonely, simply hoping to survive. Trading chocolate bars for cigarettes and reading material helped pass the downtime, but they longed for news from home. How was Mr. Harper feeling after his surgery? Did Jack make the high school baseball team? I wonder if Cousin Mary married that fella from Brownsville. Did Mom make her famous chocolate cake for Thanksgiving? And what about his girl? Was she still waiting for him? And when the mail stopped coming, soldiers were left to wonder, worry, and pine for home. For 2 years, mail sent from families across the United States in hopes of reaching their soldiers on the front lines went undelivered. It would take a momentous effort to get the mail moving again. This episode, I pay a special Veterans Day tribute to the dedication and teamwork of the Central Postal Directory Battalion, 855 African American women known as the 6888, who show us the power of teamwork when faced with achieving the impossible. These women took on the insurmountable task of reconnecting the lifeline of communication between American soldiers and their families, and just may have won the war one letter at a time. Letters were a great comfort, and the mail was indispensable. We couldn't have won the war without it. It was terribly important as a motivator of the troops. Mail call whenever it happened. It was a delight. Paul Fussell, 2nd Lieutenant, U.S. Army, military historian and author. At the beginning of World War II, there were no female U.S. military units. When the United States entered the war after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Congress and the military realized the manpower needed to fight a war on 2 fronts would exceed the number of soldiers in the field and those assigned to support duties. There was no escaping the fact that women would be essential to the war effort. With American men serving abroad, there were countless non-combat roles that needed to be filled. By 1942, there was a significant shortage of soldiers who were able to manage the postal service for the U.S. Army overseas. What the Army needed was woman power. So, on May 15, 1942, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was created as a branch of the United States Army. Initially, the WAAC was intended for white women volunteers only. Pressure from African American newspapers and activists, including First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and her friend, educator Mary McLeod Bethune, forced the military to open the WAAC to African American women. Later that summer, Major Charity Adams, the first African American female officer in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, became the commanding officer of the first group of African American women in the Corps. Major Adams would eventually become the highest-ranking African American woman in the Army by the end of World War II. In the summer of 1943, the WAAC was renamed the Women's Army Corps and was fully incorporated into the Army and given active military status. In 1944, Mary McLeod Bethune teamed up again with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and pressured the military to provide a meaningful role for Black women in the war overseas. Their efforts paid off, resulting in the creation of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, 824 enlisted and 31 officers, all African American women drawn from the WWII, the Army Service Forces, and the Army Air Forces. The 6888, as they would be known, was the only all-Black Women's Army Corps unit to be stationed overseas during the war. From February 1945 to March 1946, these 855 women would prove to the world that African American women were just as capable, determined, and patriotic as any other group of Americans. They were a super team of women from different states, backgrounds, and professions, and they had a big job to do. The new battalion was trained for their overseas mission at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. New WWII recruits underwent 4 to 6 weeks of basic training, often followed by 4 to 12 more weeks of specialist training. Although the women were tasked with support duties, they still had to be battle-ready, crawling under logs and jumping over trenches, marching with heavy rucksacks, being able to identify Nazi submarines or U-boats, knowing the difference between an American Winchester M12 shotgun and a German Karabiner 98B rifle was all part of their training. After weeks of grueling physical and classroom work, the 6888 was ready for deployment, and on February 3, 1945, the first contingent of the battalion sailed for Britain. Their ship, the Ile-de-France, survived close encounters with Nazi U-boats, which I'm sure they were all able to readily identify, and arrived in Glasgow, Scotland on February 14th, where a German V-1 rocket exploded near the dock, causing the women to run for cover. They weren't in Kansas anymore. They were in the thick of it. From Scotland, they traveled to their post in Birmingham, England. A second contingent arrived in Birmingham 55 days later. Like many of the soldiers on the front lines, it was the first time some of these young women were away from home. They'd been seasick for weeks, bombed, and now had to work in a strange new country. But they would prove up to the task. Their mission? Clear a 2-year backlog of mail, letters, and packages in 6 months and reconnect the 7 million American civilian specialists and soldiers fighting the war in Europe with their loved ones back home. The responsibility to deliver all that mail fell squarely on the shoulders of 855 African American women. It was a massive undertaking, one requiring strong leadership, teamwork, dedication, innovation, and trust. Now, sorting and delivering mail might not seem like a monumental task to most, but in war-torn Europe, with American troops moving around constantly, it certainly was for the 6888. The mail system in Birmingham was in chaos. When they arrived, they discovered warehouses and postal offices crammed from floor to ceiling with millions of letters and packages. Rats the size of cats had broken into some of the Christmas care packages for frontline soldiers. Rotted cakes and cookies littered the floors. There was estimated to be a backlog of 17 million items. To say the least, the women were in disbelief. They had heard the rumors, but now they saw the reality of their task for themselves. As she later recalled in her autobiography, Major Adams, their commanding officer, turned to her senior enlisted soldier. "Sergeant Major, formation," was all she said. "Yes, ma'am." The sergeant major formed up the battalion in the narrow space in front of the mountains of mail, and Adams marched to the front. At ease, the WWICs relaxed their stance, hands twitching behind their backs. They stared at the mountain of mail stacked up behind their commander. "I know how this looks, ladies, and I know what you're probably thinking, but we have a job to do and we're going to get it done." Now, let's get organized. And that's exactly what they did. Working conditions were less than ideal, to say the least. The warehouses were cold and dimly lit, the windows blacked out to prevent light showing during nighttime air raids. To battle the cold, many of the women resorted to wearing ski pants, field jackets, fatigues, or anything else they could to keep warm. Despite the rats, the cold, poor lighting, the mountains upon mountains of undelivered mail, and a 6-month deadline, they were determined to get the Postal Service in order and operational. Their motto was no mail, low morale. They knew letters to and from the front lines were a lifeline for servicemen and women fighting in the war. Few things mattered more to those serving abroad than getting letters from back home. So the 6888 went to work, organizing a system that would break the bottleneck and lift the spirits of their fellow Americans. I wholeheartedly believe there is immense power when a group of women come together to tackle what seems like an insurmountable challenge. The 6888 was organized into 5 companies, Headquarters, and Company A, B, C, and D. Most of the women worked as postal clerks, but others were cooks, mechanics, or admin staff, or held other support positions. They were a self-contained unit, meaning they were not attached to any male military unit. The battalion managed its own mess hall, motor pools, and supply rooms. It had its own military police and chapel. It also had its own public affairs officer and a battalion newsletter called the Special Delivery. It hosted sports teams and even put on dances at Army hospitals around England. In fact, all the positions of any Army battalion, communications, record-keeping, and recreation, were staffed by Black women. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. It's 1945. Jim Crow and segregation were the law of the land in most of the U.S., including the military. For Black women especially, sexism and racism were a daily burden. Yet here we have a group of women bound and determined to honorably serve a country and support a military that did not believe in their equal rights as women or as Black Americans, and most likely believed they would fail in their duties. Let that sink in. The women of the 6888 were a self-sufficient, well-oiled machine. They were a team. Sisters in arms, 855 strong, and they succeeded far beyond anyone's expectations, except perhaps their own. They solved one of the Army's biggest threats to military morale, and they did it together. To accomplish their mission, they devised their own system to handle the backlog of mail. They created and maintained a card index of names of soldiers with the same or similar names, using military serial numbers to distinguish between them. There must have been hundreds of Jacksons and Johnsons and Ryans scattered all around Europe. This index eventually contained 7 million cards. They were organized into 3 8-hour shifts, 7 days a week, working around the clock, sorting or pitching mail as it was called, processing and preparing letters and packages for delivery. They handled all the undeliverable mail which was sent to their location for redirection. They investigated insufficiently addressed mail for clues to determine the intended recipient, and they also handled the sad duty of returning mail addressed to service members who had died. Each shift handled an estimated 65,000 pieces of mail. Okay, let's do the math. 65,000 times 3 shifts times 7 days a week equals 1,365,000 pieces of mail each week. The sheer volume was staggering, but the 6888 was a proud team of women committed to the successful completion of their mission. Millions of people were relying on them. Failure was not an option. Yet, despite their dedication, they still had to deal with sexist and racist beliefs within the military, but they refused to let even these obstacles stand in their way. As you can imagine, the women of the 6888 were the subject of a great deal of curiosity from the local citizens of Birmingham. Major Adams received official greetings from a number of civilian and U.S. and British military officials. Over time, many of the women made friends in the local community and found the people of their host city to be polite and even friendly. The women were welcome in British public spaces and were sometimes invited to private homes for tea. What a far cry from their experiences back home. Unfortunately, their own military was not as welcoming. Segregation and second-class treatment was still a reality for the 688. Cafeteria, recreational facilities, and living quarters were separated by ethnicity and gender. Get this, the Red Cross local club and hotels welcomed black male soldiers and white female servicewomen, but not the women of the 688. When the Red Cross tried to open a separate club for these women, Major Adams led a boycott to address the disparities. She and her soldiers stuck together, refusing to step foot in the new club. Instead, they maintained their own facilities, including a hair salon, cafeteria, and recreational areas. Despite exemplary work on a job no one wanted and stellar upkeep of their quarters, the group still received criticism from inspectors about job performance. During one infamous encounter, Major Adams stopped a male general from inspecting the quarters of the women as they slept. Off-duty and headquarters personnel were all instructed to be in formation for inspection. The general berated Major Adams for the absence of some of her troops. She tried to explain to the general that her personnel had a good reason for not being there. They were working one of the 3 shifts that ensured the 24-hour processing of mail. When Major Adams told the general she was just following her orders, the outraged general interrupted her with a threat to send a white superior officer to show her how to do her job. Major Adams responded, but never broke protocol. She said, "Over my dead body, sir." She refused to be bullied, and like any good leader, she protected her team. Adams was almost court-martialed for the comment, but the general was convinced not to follow through with this threat. Ultimately, that same general had an about-face and attitude and grew to appreciate the 688's tireless work ethic and efficiency when he visited France. The women were also the subject of some hostility and rumors impugning their character spread by both white and black male soldiers who resented the fact that black women were allowed in the Army. I imagine many of the men also resented the fact that the women made it very, very clear they were not there to entertain them. Despite such treatment, the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion produced great results in Birmingham, then again in France, where their skill and efficiency were called upon to clean up postal operations in Rouen and Paris, where they met a backlog of mail that reached back 3 years. Once again, this super team of women rose to the occasion. Sadly, while in Rouen, the 6888 met with tragedy. On July 8, 1945, Private First Class Mary J. Barlow, Private First Class Mary H. Bankston, and Sergeant Dolores M. Brown were in a Jeep accident. PFC's Barlow and Bankston died at the scene. Sergeant Brown died 5 days later from her injuries. Since the War Department did not provide funds for funerals, the women banded together and pooled their resources to honor their deceased members. First Lieutenant Dorothy Scott found 3 unit members who had experience with mortuary work to take care of the bodies, and the women paid for the caskets out of their own funds. Memorial services were organized and held for the deceased, and Major Adams wrote to inform their families in the United States of their fate. Sergeant Brown, PFC Barlow, and PFC Bankston were buried with honors in the Normandy American Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer. By November 1945, only 558 women out of the original 855 remained with the battalion. On February 27, 1946, the 688th boarded the Claymont Victory for its return to the United States. The battalion was disbanded on March 9th at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. There was no parade, no heartfelt speeches in appreciation of their service. There was no public recognition at all. But for the women of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, World War II was truly a war of liberation. They served their country with pride under very trying conditions, accomplished their mission with distinction, and showed the world what a team of resilient, dedicated African American women could do if given the chance. As a team, the 6888 displayed a great amount of pride in their battalion. grace under pressure, a diligent work ethic, and a strong belief in the importance of the job at hand. And when the going got tough, I'm not sure how much tougher things could get than being in a foreign country in the middle of a world war, they relied on their battalion leaders and each other for help, motivation, and encouragement. We can learn a lot from their example of teamwork, and from geese. The most effective teamwork happens when individual team members harmonize their efforts and work toward a common goal. Take geese, for example. Wildlife scientists have concluded studies to determine why geese fly collectively in a V formation. The results of the studies uncovered some rather interesting facts that can be applied to teamwork. As each bird flaps its wings, it creates uplift for the birds following. By flying in a V formation, the whole flock adds 71% greater flying range than if one bird flew alone. Geese have discovered that they can reach their destination quicker and expend less energy when they fly together. The same can be said when people work harmoniously together on teams. By working together to achieve common goals, the individuals arrive at the desired destination quicker and easier because they are lifted up by the positive energy of others around them. People who share a common goal and sense of community can get to where they're going quicker and easier because they are traveling on the strength of one another. When the lead goose gets tired, it rotates back into the formation and another goose takes its place. The lead goose drops out of the front position and moves to the back of the formation where the resistance is lower and less energy is needed. Another goose then moves to the front position to take up the job of breaking up the airflow. As members of a team, it helps to take turns doing the difficult tasks and sharing responsibilities. When a team is functioning well, various members of the team may take the leadership role for a while because of a particular skill, capability, talent, or knowledge. On highly effective teams, everyone has the opportunity to function as leader and as a supporter. The geese in the formation honk from behind to encourage those up front to keep up their speed. When working on teams, it's important for each member to communicate regularly with each other. Constant communication among members is essential for moving effectively towards a common goal or destination. However, it's essential to make sure our communication is encouraging to others and not discouraging. The power of encouragement can do wonders when it comes to overcoming obstacles and getting results. In teams where there is good communication, support, and encouragement, production is much greater. When a goose gets sick or wounded or shot down, 2 geese drop out of formation and follow it down to help and protect it. They stay with their fallen goose mate until it's able to fly again or it dies. Then they launch out on their own with another formation or they catch up with their own flock. Like geese, we need to stand by each other in difficult times or when individuals are struggling. When one team member needs help, it is imperative for others in the group to reach out and assist the struggling teammate. Teammates work best when they do more than just work together, but genuinely care for each other's well-being. To achieve peak performance as a team, we should apply the same principles as geese do to reach their destination. Create a shared vision, a common direction, and mutual objectives. Build a sense of community and collaboration. Promote the concept of collective responsibility for reaching team goals. Reach out and assist teammates who may be struggling. And promote an atmosphere of unity and harmony. The women of the 688 would have made an excellent flock of geese. By embracing the importance of their mission, rallying around their motto of no male, low morale, they flew in a common direction, each member supporting, inspiring, and uplifting the other. They shared the responsibility of making sure the job got done and got done well. Each woman took pride in herself and in her team and was dedicated to serving the soldiers in the front lines. When they had downtime, they became closer as a team by engaging in social activities outside of work. When 3 of their teammates died, the 688 stepped up to honor their dead. They gave of themselves to ensure their 3 sisters were properly buried and memorialized. When the team was threatened or disrespected, their leader, Major Charity Adams, would have none of it. She protected her battalion at the risk of ruining her own career. Now that's true leadership. These women are an excellent example of the power of teamwork. There's an African proverb that states, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Teamwork is one of the greatest force multipliers in overcoming big challenges and achieving our goals. I happened to discover some great advice about teamwork from Chief Master Sergeant Robert Register in an article he published back in 2015 in Hulbert Field Military News. Here are the highlights from his article. It goes without saying that strong leadership is a primary factor influencing mission success. However, next to leadership, there is another powerful force at work that is equally important. The force I'm referring to is teamwork, or, as I call it, the ultimate force multiplier. I submit to you that teamwork is achieved and maintained by observing 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, know your role. Teamwork thrives when everyone on the team knows their role. Knowing your role is more than just knowing your job. It's about understanding how your contribution fits into the big picture. Mr. Andrew Carnegie, founder of U.S. Steel, defined teamwork as the ability to work toward a common vision, the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. I absolutely agree. This definition holds true today just as it did back in 1945. The women of the 688 considered themselves ordinary people, yet when they came together, focused on a shared vision, and took pride in performing their roles as company leaders, postal workers, cooks, military, police, or mechanics, they achieved extraordinary results. Rule number 2, embrace diversity. Diversity has become a flashpoint for companies and organizations looking to reflect the world more openly as we know it. Many organizations have come to realize creating and supporting diverse teams makes the organization as a whole stronger and more competitive. According to Chief Master Sergeant Register, and I quote, "Teamwork prospers when we embrace diversity by accepting the uniqueness of individuals and leverage our differences rather than suppressing them. Diversity goes beyond obvious differences of gender, race, or ethnic background. The Air Force defines diversity as a composite of individual characteristics, experiences, and abilities consistent with the Air Force core values and the Air Force mission." End quote. Yes, I realize the 688 was an all-black female battalion, and some might suggest because of this, there was a distinct lack of diversity within the team. That all black people think and act alike, and the same goes for all women. Such a suggestion would be, to put it mildly, pretty stupid. Within every race, ethnicity, and among genders, there is a diversity of thought, knowledge, experiences, religious belief, and political views. Let's all remember that, shall we? One of the greatest things about diversity is that it promotes creativity and innovation, which ultimately nurtures teamwork. By contrast, teams that lack diversity often fall into the dreaded trap of groupthink, where everyone has the same point of view, opinions, or mindset. When team members approach problems in the same way or draw upon similar experiences, they tend to produce the same limited conclusions. Dismissing or diminishing differences can have a damaging impact to a team, resulting in low morale and people feeling devalued, disrespected, resentful, and demotivated. As the 688 shows us, keeping team morale high is crucial to mission success. Rule number 3, be committed. This may be stating the obvious, but I'll state it anyway, because without team commitment, there is no team. The Chief Master Sergeant reminds us, individuals must be committed to the team to achieve teamwork. There's a big difference between being interested in your team and being committed to your team. Your commitment is demonstrated by your effort, your attitude, and your selflessness. When you're committed, you support your team even when you disagree with decisions. When you're committed to your team, you maintain a positive attitude even when you encounter conflict. When you're committed to your team, you make sacrifices of yourself for the benefit of the team. For teamwork to flourish, you must be more interested in your team's success than your individual success. Bravo, sir. My feelings exactly. Just because people work in the same office or are on the same committee or wear the same uniform doesn't make them a team. The 855 women of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion had strong leadership that was committed to their success. They developed efficient processes, routines, and systems to help them get the job done. Each soldier knew her role within the team and committed to performing to the best of her ability in service to their mission. They used teamwork as a force multiplier to accomplish a task that appeared impossible in the time frame given to them and the conditions in which they worked. Not only did they succeed in their mission to clear the 2-year backlog of mail in England and then again in France, reconnect soldiers to their loved ones back home, and increase troop morale exponentially, they did it in half the time. Remember this incredible team of women when you and your team are faced with a huge challenge and what feels like unrealistic timelines and expectations. They were a team of women who, in serving their country, broke down racial barriers, blazed new trails for gender equality in the military, and succeeded despite the many obstacles set in their path. To the 6 remaining members of the 6888, Romay Davis, Crescencia Garcia, Fanny McClendon, Gladys E. Blunt, Lena King, and Anna Mae Robertson, and your sisters-in-arms who have passed away from this world but not from our memories. I thank you for your service, your courage, and your resolve in proving to the world what we women can do in the face of overwhelming odds. You and all the women of the 6888 shine as brightlighters who light the way forward, showing us how the power of teamwork can change the world. In honor of these remarkable women, let's challenge ourselves to support, inspire, and team up with other women at work, in our communities, and in our personal lives, and take on whatever big challenges stand in the way of us successfully achieving our mission in life. Why I love these women. I said it before and I'll say it again. There is immense power when a group of women come together to tackle what seems like an insurmountable challenge, and the women of the 6888 are a shining example of this fact. When I learned about their story, I knew I had to share them with you on the podcast this Veterans Day. For me, they epitomize the grit and grace African American women have exhibited throughout time. Steadfast, determined, proud, intelligent, and undeterred by the sexist and racist ideologies of others who have no idea what we women are capable of. Their example of teamwork and perseverance when faced with what must have felt like an impossible mission inspires me to harness the power of the Aquitaine sisterhood and team up with women who share an affinity for creating a world in which all women realize the power and strength we have when we join together in a common cause. The women of the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion are the brightlighters, the force multipliers who show me there's no mission we can't accomplish, no task we can't complete, or challenge we can't overcome when we join forces and work together as a team. To learn more about the remarkable women of the 6888 and the power of teamwork, click on their portrait on the Aquitaine Project episodes page. There you'll find links connecting you to their amazing story, experiences, and accomplishments, along with resources on the importance of teamwork. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and I'd love it if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, my brightlighters, shine bright, gather your team, and go make a difference in the world.